Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me, all the members of the Interamerican Institute for Democracy. I feel very prestigious in being here, very honored to be here. It's the second time I'm addressing you with similar issues, yet here we are. The time has passed, and the problem has only become bigger and more challenging. So that you understand more or less the context of how I see Latin America, how I see the countries of Latin America in the context of the political evolution in the 21st century. I will actually have an analogy made to a previous period of time in a different continent in Europe, when the Moorish empires invaded the Iberian Peninsula. There they found fertile land, they found a fragmented and weak local regimes, local monarchies, and they quickly succumbed to a violent proposal. Either you adopt the Muslim faith or you die, literally. So the conquering of the Iberian Peninsula was very quick and with a very forthright and tremendous power in their narrative. The traditional values of the Christianity had to resort to escape to a very small place in the north of the Iberian Peninsula called the Asturias. There they formed a new government and coalition that required 200 years to reconquer the Iberian Peninsula with wars of reconquista. So I think that we're in a similar process in Latin America, where we've been overridden by a very strong narrative, a very strong presence of powers that rely mostly on, not on political power, not on convincing, but also on criminal powers, like narco powers, and also terrorists that terrorize the whole region. So the traditional values of the Latin American people have receded to a very small place. Thankfully, this small place is actually a big country, Brazil. Yet, even in Brazil, we don't have a total control over what's going on politically. We have elected a conservative representative to the presidency of Brazil. We have elected a few congressmen like myself to represent conservative values and the values of the atemporal values of the Latin America, or at least the Brazilian people. Yet we do not command the country, and the agenda is still being implemented via the media, via the universities, via part of the congressmen that also still believe in the models of the 20th century. However, in the 21st century, we're witnessing that the model of the 20th century, which was a state-run economy, a state-influenced control over society, a welfare state, a very aggressive welfare state was implemented in Brazil over the 100 years of the 20th century. And in the beginning of the 21st century, reforms of every sort were needed to stabilize or to restabilize Brazil due to the fallacy of the welfare state and of the social state, as they call it. So this is the prognosis. Are we still going to maintain the utopia view of a welfare state, a very aggressive welfare state, or are we soon to liberalize our economy and to reduce the size and the influence of the state-run economy, society, and politics? It's very important for us to note that most countries that have adopted an aggressive welfare state with a presidential system, they are poor countries. In the name of social justice, in the name of equality, in the name of many premises of helping the people, they end up succumbing society into almost a slave relationship between society and the state, where society becomes dependent on the state and the state becomes the master of society and the economy. Freedom ceases to exist in ecosystems like that. Brazil is no exception. This is the challenge that most conservatives have in Latin America, not really controlling the system, yet putting forth a very strong presence in the commanding presence of our president and also of many congressmen that came to create a different narrative. They came to reintroduce perhaps the beginning of a new reconquista of Brazil, and maybe help our Latin American friends in re-achieving their sovereignty. Why is sovereignty, am I mentioning sovereignty here as a problem? Because back in the 90s, in the beginning of the 90s, a criminal organization made up by socialist parties gathered together in what they called Foro of São Paulo, Foro de São Paulo. Their objectivity was very clear. They wanted to establish a region-wide socialist control. They put forth whatever they needed to do in order to elect socialist presidents, and they succeeded in many cases. Actually, most of the regions succumbed to socialism, from Mexico all the way down to Argentina and Chile, Brazil included. For many years, these countries witnessed what it is to be under a socialist regime, or at least a growing influence of socialism within society and the organizations and so forth. Brazil, as well as many other countries, had a, what can we call it, a breath of fresh air during the past 5 to 10 years, where many of these socialist regimes were challenged by important counter narratives and important mobilizations of these peoples in order to form new and disruptive conservative governments. However, we're now witnessing a new backlash of challenge, a more aggressive backlash of this system that was implemented over the 90s and the initial of the first 20 years of this century. And this backlash is very strong. They not only command the media, they command the universities and students, they still command a lot of the politicians, the bureaucracy, but most importantly, they command the electoral system. It is very important to understand that the electoral system in all these countries have been suffering a lot of interference by different types of narratives and destroying a more transparent model, in place a more electronic, intransparent model. Obviously, it's in the name of transparency, in the name of efficiency, in the name of many of these attributes falsely claimed to be the ones that they are upholding, that they implement these electoral systems. So the challenge is, how do we go forward if their control on the electoral process becomes complete, which is signalizing to be. I think what elected me and what elected the current president of Brazil and many other congressmen was the fact that they understood that they couldn't control, even in a country like Brazil, because of its size, because of its diversity, because of the volume of different states and electoral colleges. It is very difficult for you to control, even if you do have control of an electronic electoral process. However, they're refining that control, and that becomes a real challenge. Now, what is behind all this? The Foro of São Paulo is still active. It is now re-engaging in a more aggressive level. And if you look at countries as what you see as far as their state organization and what really commands power, a growing power is not socialism or conservatism. The growing power in Latin America is the narco-traffickers, is the narco state. That is the growing power that is overriding any type of ideology. You cannot even implement socialism, as Mexico has proven, by electing a socialist president. However, he had to bow to the power of the narco-traffickers in releasing one of the most wanted criminals for narco-trafficking in that country to the narco-traffickers themselves. So they pose the power within the power. They pose a state within the state. And that is subverting every single institution in Latin America. Some countries are able to fight that, like Brazil, I think, is commanding at least some control over its country, but not convincingly winning this war. Some states have succumbed to narco-traffickers, yet others are still maintaining a facade of real institutions. But other countries have succumbed to the narco-traffickers, like Venezuela, and maybe even, I'm not wanting to put forth here some speculation, but our impression is that other countries like Bolivia is also succumbing to the power of narco-traffickers. And their influence is also being legitimized by many political parties. Now, they're considered to be an oligarchy to command all this region. Yet there are other oligarchies that are at play. There are many oligarchies, especially from other countries like China, that are interested in commanding control of natural resources, also of the agricultural produce from Brazil, becoming, since Brazil is one of the largest contributors to feeding the Chinese peoples, and also oligarchies regarding the financial sector. They also understand and they own a lot of assets in the region. So there are many oligarchies at play here in the command of Brazil, specifically in Latin American region. However, Brazil is the only country that has not succumbed entirely yet to those oligarchies. It's still putting up a fight. That's why it is the last bastion, the new version of communism that is putting forth in Latin American region. It's not the communism that we saw in the 20th century, where you have the total command of the means of production and the total ownership of the means of production in the hands of the state. You don't need to have that if you control the electoral process. You don't need to have that if you control via regulations all the assets and via taxation what everybody can do or can have and accumulate. So it's a new form of communism where you have a centralized control, still have central planning, yet with technology there's a new version of social control and of the economics control and of political control that can be implemented. And that is the new version that we're witnessing, being implemented and even put forth by many political parties in Brazil openly. So you're creating even popular support to those ideas. So this is the challenge that Latin America faces right now. And what can we do? Well, understanding that these are the challenges and how the communists have acted in the 21st century, at least in the 20th century, the conservative majority which exists in Brazil, we have to understand that our mission is to curtail that ability to create a dictatorship. We have to curtail that ability to create a despotic system. How do we do that? Understanding that within the 20th century, communists have influenced many of the European countries and Latin American countries to change their constitution and to become a welfare state, implement a lot of the socialist pillars of assistentialism, of labor laws, of a centralized controlled social security system, of unified health system, of an educational system that is also state-run and state-controlled. All of these are pillars of the socialist regimes that were implemented in the region, in the constitution, and Brazil is no exception. So if we have a conservative majority that wants to protect the idea of freedom, the idea that the state is not supposed to run the lives of its citizens as an individuals and influence disproportionately on the lives and the welfare of the individuals and the future of the country. It's not via a dictatorship that we're going to achieve that. Then we need to put forth constitutional reform. All of Brazil and also many of the other countries have to understand that there is a need to get away from the welfare state, social state that was created in the 20th century and reintroduce constitutional reform in the 21st century. Now, as maybe this is unheard of, being led by conservative forces, which has never happened, yet it is of utmost importance and it is feasible of doing. So the focus and the conscientiousness of Latin American peoples is that they need to embark in constitutional reforms in order to avoid that the whole region fall within a autocratic centralized planning system, which is the idea. It's trying to create a Soviet Union of Latin America. This is their plans is very vocal, it's very present, and they are achieving now in the short run. They have achieved another victories that put them also back in the path of creating the centralized control. How can the United States and the conservatives in the United States help? First is understanding the problem. I think that is of utmost importance. Even in Brazil, many Brazilians don't understand this as being a problem, which is a problem in itself. Second is to understand that unlike the United States that have a very solid constitution and protects them, and the Americans should protect their constitution the way it is and not really embark in any utopian ideas of changing it. Not only that, it's promoting that Latin America that succumbed to the socialist movement of the 20th century and changed their constitution lead to change back their constitution into something less intrusive, less despotic, and that is only favorable to those that want more command and control. This is the challenge of Latin America. This is why I'm here. I appreciate the time. I appreciate the help in getting this word across. Thank you very much for everyone for the attention. Thank you.